I think it's time we take a look at another boombox from my collection. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Well, it's not as big as that, but it's a big, old, heavy thing, this. It came out in 1981. This is a Sharp VZ2000, also known as the VZ-V2 in Japan. It's gained a reputation as being one of the classic boomboxes of the early 1980s, and it is a little bit different to most of those others in that whilst it has the standard features of an AM/FM radio and a cassette deck, rather obviously this one stands out from its peers in the fact that it has a 12-inch record player in it. Now, I bought this only a couple of years ago from a chap who was a bit reluctant to sell it, but he sold it at a good price because the record player didn't work. It was like that when he got it. He always intended to fix it up, but never got around to it. And I think I understood why when I started looking into what it took to take this thing apart to repair that record deck. For someone who isn't experienced in disassembling and reassembling things, a little bit of a daunting task. So let's see how I got on when I had a go. I've got to mention that I'm unusually concerned about taking this thing apart. I mean, I've taken loads of things apart before, but this one looked particularly complicated. I've got the service manual here, and the pages with regard to disassembly look a little bit concerning. I'm hoping I can get it all back together again afterwards. Of course, that's one of the problems, and I don't want to break anything in the process of trying to disassemble it. These things are very expensive and rare, and there's lots of fiddly bits of plastic that could just snap off. So I went looking on YouTube to see if there were any good disassembly videos, and I couldn't find any. I mean, maybe they're there somewhere, but all I could see was people with one of these, and they'd show one shot and they say, well, it needs new belts, and the next shot will be, right, I swapped all the belts, put it back together again, and now look how it works. And I'm missing the bit in the middle that I need. So what I've got here, I bought a belt kit online on eBay. I just searched for the belt kit for this thing. It comes with two belts. I think there's the main belt for the turntable, and I think there's a little one for the arms here. And the first thing to do, according to this, is to take this part off here. They call it the dust cover. It'll be interesting to see what I can get to once I've removed this section. I think the main reason for taking this off might be to get to the stylus behind here, but I thought you could perhaps get to that from the inside as well. But anyway, we'll take it off and see what is behind here. Not a great deal. Not sure there was any point in doing that, but we'll put that to one side. The next thing I've got to do is open the door on it, and apparently there are 3 screws in the back of here, and that enables me to get the door cover off. Okay, so straight away, after removing those 3 screws, I'm in a position where this thing doesn't want to unclip. I did see some chap mention that there's a clip in the middle here, which, if I can just push that, that might get this front off. Doesn't mention it in the disassembly instructions though. There we go. Right, okay, that bit's off. Pull out 12 knobs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. When it's hard to remove them, use a string or the like to help pulling out. Now, so often on this model, these are broken off. Now, I've got one broken one on the base here, which is just loosely held in place. So I need to get the rest of that out of there and try and glue the end on. You can get people to 3D print these, because there's so many people with this issue, with this particular machine, with these switches all snapped off, that somebody came up with a design for them. But so far we're not doing too bad. They're all just pulling straight out. So there's a treble one. Right, now as I think you can see there, those are dirty, so I'm going to be cleaning those up before I put these switches back on. And hopefully I can get the remnants of the switch out of there, you see, because if we just look at these, I don't know if you can see these on the camera too well, the focusing's probably going to be off, but yeah, you see I've got a longer bottom on that one than that one. So that one's got left behind in the machine, but all the other ones seem to be fine. So these are supposed to just come straight out, I think, if I can just lift them out. Right. Need to have like a kung fu grip to get these things out. I can see why they're going on about getting string underneath them. Finally. Okay, so here are the knobs and switches that I've removed. I'm going to keep them in the order in which I remove them, because of course some of these are for 3 positions and some are just for 2. And these are different from one another. You'll see this one's got a line on it, but also you'll notice it's really pretty mucky. So I'm going to be giving all these things a really good clean before I put them back on, because there's parts of these that have never seen light of day since the thing was put together. So now's the chance to give everything a nice polish. And we seem to be taking 2 things off the bottom, and they've both got 2 screws in. And this is what I've got on the bottom. Those are the things, but they've got 4 screws in. Now, the question is, which screws am I removing? We'll take it partially out on both sides and see if this plate on the bottom then goes loose. Not convinced. What do these 2 do? Oh, those seem to be loosening it more. I think it's spring-loaded, this thing. And those seem to be doing nothing, they're just going through holes in the bottom. Ah, they're holding a metal frame here. Certainly don't want to loosen those anymore, so I'll just pop them in. So it's things like that that have the potential for confusion, because the instructions, it just said take 2 screws out, and it didn't say which ones. Once you've done it once, of course, you know, but until that time, it's just guesswork. Right, so that's those. Right, so we're down to this business about removing 11 screws at the front cabinet. Right, well I've got 2, 1 either side, so I'll take those 2 out first of all. That's 1. And that's the other one. Long screws, those. Now to get to the rest of the screws, I've got to put it upright again, but before I do that, I just wanted to show you this on the bottom here. On each corner there's a rubber foot, but on this corner, it's got a switch in it. Now I'm guessing that's so that you can only play the record when the thing is set down on a surface. No doubt if you pick it up it's going to stop. But we'll find that out if I get the record player working. So my next job is to remove a screw up here. Right, well I've got that one out. Okay. If I'm reading this correctly, I've removed all the screws from the front, there's just 3, so all the rest are around the back. Right, well there's a load of screws here, but looking at this picture I don't seem to be getting involved in these ones in the middle here. It's the ones at the top and on the sides, so all around the extremities. Okay, so those are the 5 main screws out of the back, and then 3 across the top. 1, 2, 3. And apparently I've got to be careful not to break some controller boards. Nice if I knew where they were. Yeah, so down the side of here I've got a speaker wire. I'm just trying to find the socket for it. Those speaker connectors were extremely difficult to disconnect, but I think we should be able to get these 2 halves apart now. Wow, this is heavy as well. Just want to pick it up without snapping anything. As you can see, I've got no access to the belt yet. It's underneath this section here. And reading the instructions, again, it's a little bit vague, but it refers to the removal of the player mechanism. There's a couple of screws here and there that need to be taken out, a couple of connectors down the side that need to be removed, and then I think this whole thing should just come out as one unit, and then I'll be able to flip it over and get to the belt on the back. So let's see if I can figure this out. Okay, so here are the connectors I need to disconnect. I'm going to loosen the wires first so we can separate out the turntable from the rest of it. If I undo both of these, that should mean the turntable can come out. Right, so as you can see now, the turntable is no longer connected to the other half by those wires, so I just need to undo the rest of this. Yeah, this is the bit I'm a bit confused about. It seems to be removing 2 screws at the top here, and the only 2 I can think of are on there. There's no others. I don't know why I'd be removing screws from that circuit board, but we'll take them out because it seems to be indicating that I need to do it. Right, there we go. So, okay, well that's out of the way. But then the next thing I need to do is to loosen 2 screws in here, apparently. Oh. Right, I now see why they wanted me to take this off, because it's attached to this part. So if I was just to unclip all that, there we go. We've got the turntable out. Brilliant. Okay, well I can see the little belt I need to replace. That's an easy one. I can feel that's a bit sticky and it's lost all its elasticity, so definitely need to swap that one out. The other one runs around the outside of this and it is stuck to it, so I need to clean that off. And I think to get to it I'm going to have to take 2 screws out here and 2 at the back. There's the motor, so the belt's going to come from the motor and around here. So let me just remove this now. I've got to watch out that I don't catch any of these wires, so I've got to give it a little bit of slack as well so that everything can be moved out of position, because what I'm going to do is hinge this up and across. Now these look like socketed things but they're not, so I don't want to mess around with those. That one is, but with this one being loose I'm hoping the whole thing can just kind of hinge that way. We'll find out in a second. One of the main things with putting this one back together is going to be routing the wires properly. Okay, so that's all 4 of those out, so this should now be able to be removed. At least that's what I was hoping. Yeah, I can sort of move it about. Oh, I think that's because the belt was sticking it down. Let's free up some of these wires. Right, try again. There we go. Ooh, so yeah, there's some of the belt there at the back. Right, so I've got my isopropyl alcohol. It's going to take me quite a while, but it needs doing. You can't just put a belt on when the thing's in this condition. Right, so I'm going to crack on with this. It's not the most exciting job in the world, so I'll fast forward a little bit until we've got a nice clean turntable with no gunky substance left on it. Right, well there we go. It's clean now. I'm getting nothing off there at all. It's nice and smooth. I'm probably quite lucky really that the belt didn't go underneath and get stuck around all this stuff, because it would be a little bit more tricky to get to. There we go. Right. Right, well that seems to be sitting right now. The belt's running at the right height. Everything looks fine there, so I just need to replace this little one as well. So I'll just take that off there. Luckily that hasn't got stuck to anything, although I will clean that pulley there just to be on the safe side. Spin it around a bit, check it's properly located, and that's that. Okay, now before I start putting the turntable back in, I'd like to do something with this section here, because we've got a broken slider behind one of these apertures and I'd like to be able to get it out. I can't extricate it through this tiny hole though, but I think if I take a screw out from either end, this whole thing should lift off and then I'll be able to get access to it. While I'm there, I might as well spray the potentiometers with some contact cleaner, and once this thing's removed it'll be a lot easier to clean all this muck that's accumulated in these indents. So let's take this off and have a look. Right, well that's the screws out, but I'm not sure it still wants to come out. Let's have a look. Ah, it's because there's a little light in the top there that lights up the tuning dial. I think that just slides out. Let's just take that out to one side. There we go. Right, so that's that out. Where's the inside of my thing? Oh, there it is. Some needle nose pliers on that. See if I can get the centre part of it out. Yeah, someone's glued that in an attempt to fix it, which is a great shame because I want to get that part out so I can replace it. Yeah, it's coming out now. Oh, where did that bugger go? Okay, so that's the bit I've retrieved from inside the switch. That's the part that used to attach to it. I was originally considering super gluing these together, but they don't quite marry up properly, and I don't think I'll be able to keep it structurally sound. It's too small of a part that's snapped there. So instead I'm going to buy a replacement switch. Now one thing I don't remember is whether or not this tuning dial light worked. I think it did. I'm not sure. It'd be nice to replace it if it wasn't working while I've got the lid off, but I just don't know, and I don't have a replacement now, so I'm just going to hope that it was working. So just pop it out of the way. Now let's just try cleaning this dial. I've got a cloth here, slightly damp. Ooh, yeah, look at that. I didn't want to use the vacuum cleaner on these because there might be an issue with static. I'm going to take a look through my sorted belts to see if I've got one to replace this tape counter belt. It's a little bit loose, and it seems like now would be a good time to swap it. Yeah, that should be alright. Okay, before I put this back on, I'm going to give it a good wash in the sink with some soapy water, because as you can see, it's accumulated quite a bit of crud over the years behind those sliders. Right, well that looks a lot better, far more hygienic, so I'll just put it back on. Of course, as before, I've got to remember to put the bulb back in the top, so it's got this little keyhole type slot here. It just slides to the side like that. Now before I try putting the case back together again, I think I'd best clean it up, because just look at that. See, that's a part of it that you couldn't clean because it was underneath the record player section. So whilst I've got it like this, it's a good opportunity to clean everything. Right, so now I've got to try and get this turntable back in here. Just put that circuit board on the front, make sure the wires are down to the side, and try and line it up. Right, so we've got to the stage now, I've cleaned everything, I've got it all back together apart from putting the case back on the top. I'm not going to mess with the cassette deck because that was working just fine, so no need to risk damaging it. The belt looks fine on it, so just leave that alone. Just need to put the top back on here, or the front I should say. Now that's the problem with this thing, because it's two halves, but they're both rather heavy. Normally with things you take one piece off and it's like a light piece of plastic that you can manoeuvre. With this, the bit that I'm putting on has the speakers in it, and those are heavy. And I'm putting it against things like this circuit board here, which really could quite easily just get broken off. And it's got to fit over all these switches and buttons and things. So this is the bit where it could all go a little bit wrong. Just got to really be careful I don't catch anything. Yeah, this is not easy. Whew. Let's try that again. Well, that's in, but then of course I've got to attach the speaker wires now. This might be working out so far. Fingers crossed. Right, lots more screws to put back in yet. You're probably wondering why I'm not testing it first. Well, I've got to the stage that if this doesn't work, there's nothing I can do to it anyway, so I might as well just pop it back together again. At least I'll have a working cassette deck and radio, if nothing else. So I'm just going ahead, putting all the screws back in it. Just one more thing to go on the bottom. These plates with a spring attached to them, they go through the hole there. There's a bit of compression goes on the spring, and you can see that it locates in that rubber cup there. So once these are in there and I screw it on, it holds the record player mechanism just a little bit up, isolates it from the rest of the case. Right, so I've plugged it in. Let's see if the last couple of days have been a total waste of time. Well, it switches on. Let's open the record player up. Now I've got some old records here that I bought in a bundle for testing things with. They're not ones that I cherish, so if it does damage it, it doesn't matter. If it plays though, I'm going to get this thing 2 new styluses, but there's no point if it doesn't work, because a couple of styluses for this will cost about £36, so no point throwing good money after bad. Right, put it on phono. Oh, sorry, I should say phono, people complain. Right, let's press play. Something's happening.
We just haven't got a clue what to do. Just even go the way. There's got to be a way.
Blockbuster, right. I think it needs a new stylus. That sounded a bit ropey, but it's working. Let's play the other side. This will be a test. This one's moving back to the beginning. The other one's round the back here somewhere. Turning the record in the other direction, of course. Any second now. I can hear it's in the running. There we go. Wow, it works. I haven't broken it. I'm amazed. Let's just try the radio. When they all should let us be. Tape. Let's put a tape in. It doesn't just flipping work. I'm actually shocked by that. I really wasn't expecting it to work quite that well, if at all. Right, I'm going to put the front back on. I'll order myself some new styluses, or styli should I say, and hopefully I'll be able to give you a proper talk around the features of this next. Now I'll just show you how the record is held in place. So once you open the door, the record is brought out at a slant. It enables you to hold both sides of the record to remove it carefully. And then once you pop it back in here, you just put it in the same on the shelf at that angle. And then once you close the door, the centre spindle is brought up into contact with it and the record is held vertically. Now, this is not the first time that I've featured a Sharp vertical record player in a video. Back in 2014, I picked up a new old stock standalone model, and Sharp used variations of this technology in a number of different systems over the years. One curious thing about the VZ2000, aka the V2, is that it was redesigned after only around about a year or so on the market. The newer version, the VZ-2000, aka the V20, that one moved all the controls off the top slanted section and onto the front panel. Now, I think there've got to be more reasons behind redesigning this than just a desire to have a more uniform look across the range. I've got to expect perhaps the newer version would be cheaper and simpler to assemble. As far as I know, the only significant difference in performance between the older and newer one is that the newer one has a slightly reduced power output, and also the twin amplification circuits for each of the stereo channels was reduced down to just one per side. One thing that's worth mentioning about both these devices, though, is that they were really designed more as all-in-one music systems for the home. They might occasionally be lugged from, say, the lounge to the patio, but really it's just a slightly more convenient version of their larger systems. Calling them boomboxes is a little bit revisionist, as while they might nowadays be a familiar sight at boombox meetups back in the early 80s, it was very unlikely that anyone would have taken one of these things more than a few yards away from their house. The bulk was one thing, the weight was another. Loaded up with a full set of 10 D cells, it weighs in at 18 kilograms or 39.6 pounds. Now, I don't know how long those batteries would power this thing for, but really, if you had to ask, then you couldn't afford to run it from batteries. I brought it outside today, though, so that we can get a clearer look at it. Now, just talking about the record player section first, from left to right on these controls, there's the play cut or stop button, and when playback is stopped, the arm returns to the home position. Now, after raising the arm, it can be moved back and forth across the record, and its position is easily seen through the window on the front. You can choose to play both sides of a record, or just side A or B, and to repeat whichever option of those you've selected. Of course, it'll play at 33 1/3 and 45 RPM. Now, to play side B, the turntable, of course, has to turn in the opposite direction because the arm is being brought in from the rear. When the B side is being played, the arm on the front still moves across the window, mirroring the position of the one that's on the back, so that you can use it as a reference point. But of course, the one on the front doesn't come into contact with the record whilst this is happening. If you take the record player out of the equation, though, this really has a pretty standard and relatively basic feature set. So I'll just quickly go through these features. You can see from the source selector buttons on the right that the radio here can pick up long wave, medium wave and FM. The cassette deck is also at an angle on the top, and it has a slightly unusual loading tray mechanism. It incorporates a basic music search system that allows you to locate the next track forward or back, and of course it does this by fast forwarding through the tape whilst listening for the silence between the tracks. There are separate left and right recording level controls, Dolby B noise reduction, and there's a manual tape type selector. Now, I did end up filing down and gluing that broken switch together, so I wasn't leaving a blank space on the top of this, and I temporarily put it into the mic mixing position. Now, that's a control that I won't be using. It could be used for controlling the level of the twin mic inputs on the front, but that would be a feature mostly geared towards karaoke use. There's more to look at around the back. Above the battery compartment there are connectors for external speakers, and the version I have is the European VZ-2000E, so it's multi-voltage and it's got a selector to change the voltage for AC, or it can be powered by a 15-volt DC adapter. Now if the single FM antenna isn't good enough, there are also sockets to connect external ones, both for FM and AM, and being a European model, the auxiliary input and output is provided by a single DIN socket. Note on the US model, these connectors are RCA plugs. Oh, and remember that switch on the bass? Yeah, it works just how I expected. If you're playing a record and then you pick the machine up, you'll get the same results as if you'd have pressed the cut button on the top. Now moving back inside, you can see the LEDs a bit better here. These have multifunctions. There's a level display, which is shown during recording or playback, but if I hold the switch in the centre to the right position, not only does it light up that tuning dial light, so yeah, it was working after all, but also the purpose of those LED meters changes. So the top row now indicates the battery status and the bottom row acts as a tuning strength indicator for the radio. Now as far as sound quality goes, well, in my opinion it's very good. It really does go quite loud. And that turntable is well isolated, so turning up the volume doesn't make the Stylus jump out of the groove. If I was being ultra critical, I've got to say it doesn't really have the level of puncher-in-the-gut bass that you might be expecting from just looking at the thing's formidable appearance. But then again, in recent years, the bass has really been boosted in a lot of more modern speakers in a way that they probably couldn't have done in the early 80s. And then again, they might have been thinking about that Stylus skipping when they were designing this. But I don't want to take anything away from it. It really does produce a good, well-rounded, balanced, distortion-free sound that still entertains. Look what turned up just as I was wrapping up my replacement styluses and the 3D printed switch replacement. Now I've tried fitting this and it's a little bit thick. I think it needs filing down a touch. At the moment it would risk damaging the switch if I shoved it in, and I'm sure I'll probably never be able to get it out again. So I'm just going to stick with the one I've got in there. However, these, I think I'll put them in. Might as well. I'm just getting it into a position that it will be easier to grab the end of it. Now, if I kill the power, is that going to go back in? No, it stayed there. That's going to make it a lot easier to swap out. Yeah, so that goes under that section, and then it just bends round and clicks into place, or at least that's the idea. Yeah, it's all right, that. That's clicked into position. So you can see these things are able to move around a little bit. There's a counterweight on the back of there as well. But yeah, 2 brand new styluses now. Let's just turn the power on and then these should go back into their home position. There we go. And as you can see, if you tried to swap out the stylus once it's right in the corner here, it would be a little bit tricky. Now, when it comes to collectible boomboxes, the ones that I'm really interested in are from the early part of the 1980s, the ones that have an aesthetic like this, loads of chrome, loads of switches, big old speakers. When things start moving on into the era when compact disc players were included in them, the machines themselves kind of lost the look. They tended to go black plastic, unimpressive devices. Yeah, a lot more usable nowadays because you've got a compact disc player in rather than a cassette player, but still, I'd much rather go for this look. But when you go for things from the early 80s, like the JVC M90, you tend to just have a radio and a cassette player. And if you wanted to buy any new music releases, if there were any of those worth buying, then you're left trying to find them on cassette. And most things nowadays, of course, don't come out on cassette apart from some kind of novelty release, limited edition in terrible quality. That's where this range of Sharp things really come into their own now. Because after all these years, you can still go and get the latest new releases, the vast majority of them, on vinyl record. So if you want a classic early 80s boombox that can play the latest new releases on a physical format, well, you want something like this. And you'll have to pay for it as well. They're not cheap, these things. This one cost me 500 quid with a broken record player a couple of years ago, and I thought I got a pretty good deal with that. Yeah, I mean, these things go way up there. I've seen the Japanese ones in red go for about £2,000, but oh, those look nice. I was tempted, but not that much. Anyway, that's my look at my VZ2000. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at it here with me today. I'm very happy I managed to get it working so I could properly demonstrate it to you. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.